Go. Okay. Is yours good?
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. Yay. Please be comfortable. Have a seat. Thank you for joining us. We're here to celebrate Six Truths and a Lie tonight. And I'll just briefly introduce Ream and then let her kick it off with a short reading. And then we'll have a conversation about this fantastic book. Okay, so Reem is the author of The Next New Syrian Girl and Six Truths and a Lie. She's a Syrian American raised full-time in Orange County, California, and part-time during the summers. So Six Truths and a Lie is her fantastic second book. If you haven't read it yet, there are copies over there waiting for you at the register. And I'm just so excited to chat about it tonight. So here's the brief pitch if you don't know what it's about. The Independence Day Six could be saved by the truth, but only if they manage to get others to believe it. As fireworks pop at a rowdy 4th of July bonfire party, an explosion off the California coast levels an oil rig, resulting in chaos and worse, murder. At the center are 6 Muslim teens, 6 patriots, 6 strangers, 6 suspects. An old soul stuck in a modern world, an aspiring doctor caught in the wrong place, an influencer with a reputation to protect, a perfect daughter with secrets to hide, a soccer star headed for Stanford, and an immigrant in love, each with something to hide and everything to lose. Faced with accusations of terrorism, the 6 are caught in a political game that will pit them against one another for exoneration. They each must choose, betray the others to guarantee their own independence, or reveal their secrets to earn justice and freedom for them all. What a pitch. Yeah.
And also, this is Emily. Emily is, yes, she is a writer, soon to be author. Hopefully we will see her books on shelves. And she's my dear friend who I'm so happy can be here and moderate and ask me questions because she's one of the first people to read my books and she gives me great feedback.
Thank you. Yeah. It's really an honor. Yeah, seeing how this book has gotten even better since I read it a couple of years ago is just like, yeah, mind-blowing.
Yeah, so it's been a few years, but it's finally out and I'm really excited for it to be out there. I also want to say thank you to the bookstore for having me. It's such a beautiful bookstore. I'm like going to be here all the time. And thank you. I really appreciate my family for all the things that they did and for, making the food for the event today. So, and my friends as well. So thank you for everyone who came out today.
Will you read from the prologue a little bit?
Yes. So there is a prologue, and I was telling Emily I'm very nervous about reading from it. I don't like to read my writing out loud. It's weird. It feels off. But
great, though.
I will do it for everyone here. Unbelievable is an antonym of itself. So suspend disbelief for a sec. Your younger sister taking the last cookie is unbelievable. Spilling coffee in the car is unbelievable. Often what we call unbelievable is too believable. Unbelievable was Samia getting stuck in traffic on the 10 along with everyone else running late for their Independence Day parties. Unbelievable was the fuel tank low light on Abdullahi's Civic, which he wished was a 1967 Chevy. Unbelievable was Nasreen arriving too early to the bonfire because she had to respect her parents' curfew. Unbelievable was Qais flouncing around the beach shirtless, flaunting his muscles in the late afternoon sun. Unbelievable was Mujda twiddling her thumbs, pretending not to take a peek at the boys. Unbelievable was Zamzam having to chaperone her little brother at the ridiculous bonfire. None of that, in actuality, was unbelievable. Unbelievable was a war on an idea. Unbelievable was a terrorist attack that wasn't. Unbelievable was a cop shooting a teenage boy for holding a cell phone. Unbelievable was 6 strangers ending a bitterly ironic 4th of July in holding cells. For those 6, unbelievable ceased to exist in their lexicon. The Independence Day 6 could be saved by the truth, but only if they managed to get others to believe it. Believing is seeing, and sometimes justice chooses not to see. Sometimes the circles in the Venn diagram of truth and justice fail to overlap. In a way, the truth has come to be an antonym of itself. For the 6, the truth and the lie, what is believed and what is not, made no difference. Samia, Nasreen, Qais, Mujda, Abdullahi, Zamzam. Believe them.
Thank you. Yeah. I feel like that deserves a round of applause.
I'm glad I did it and got over my fear.
Yeah, thank you for facing it.
Yes.
Can you kick it off by maybe just telling us a little bit about like what brought you to write this book? What inspired it? What questions were you thinking about? What did you want people sort of grappling with as they read?
Yeah, so I started writing this book it was a while ago. So like around COVID time when it first started, there was a lot of Black Lives Matter protests, and I had gone to some, and I was just really inspired by a call for change and the fact that there's a lot of social injustice in the country, and so I really wanted to write something that spoke to that and also spoke to the Muslim experience with, surveillance and kind of everything that's we've been experiencing in a post 9/11, but also since forever. Because I feel like this book is described as like in a post 9/11 world, but I do feel like Muslims have always lived, with this discrimination and with this prejudice, whether or not 9/11, had affected and created all the discrimination and all the like laws, the Patriot Act and all that stuff. So I did want to write something that was really important, but also that really just spoke to the characters and the feelings and how they interact with each other. And that was a really important piece for me. So that's why there's 6 points of view. So we go through all the different characters. And it was a lot. But I feel when I had the idea at first, when I went to those protests, I was like, I'm not strong enough of a writer to do this. 6 points of view, what I really wanted and what I envisioned was too much. But then I just got inspired. I think at one point I was like, well, if I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it. So I just took the leap and I wrote the book.
And I think you pull it off beautifully. I'm just so impressed by how each of those 6 characters has their own story, their own perspective, their own voice. Can you talk a little bit more about why you thought it was important to sort of include all 6 of them and how they shed different light on the themes and the topics you're talking about?
Yeah, so the characters, there's 2 Arab American characters. So Palestinian and a Syrian Lebanese character. And then so they have a very different experience than the characters in the book that are Black. And so I have 2 characters that are also Black in the book so that we can see the difference and also the way that the minorities within a minority kind of look at each other and they're like, if I don't get ahead, you're going to get ahead. And I want to be the one that's like absolved of all of these problems. And I don't have, I want to be the one token. I don't know what it's called. Do you know what I'm talking? Do you know that? I'm trying to think of that word.
Yeah, it's sort of that like internalized competition in a world that's like really set up against you.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I wanted to showcase that. And then I have 2 brown characters. One character is from Afghanistan and the other one is Pakistani. And so I just wanted to show that even though they're all Muslim, there's a lot of things that really tear them apart. And it pulls away from their final goal, which is to, exonerate all of them and to not, to save all of them and to bring out the actual truth. And if we don't work together, and a lot of times I see the Muslim community and I notice that we don't work together, then we're not going to get anywhere. So I really wanted to show that there's so many different, backgrounds, and it really affects how us as a whole get anything done in the community.
It's such a powerful message. Mm-hmm. And they all manage to be like real individual characters, I think. They're not just like representing these different parts of their identity. They're like people who I feel like I know. They've got senses of humor and like whole backstories and lives behind all 6 of them. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious how you went about developing those. Like, how did the voices come to you? How did you think about fleshing out this cast and making them all feel so like different and real?
I think I've told you this before. I pick toxic traits for all of my characters. So I go, okay, what's this character's toxic trait? Like this one is the influencer, for example. She's very vain and she's not afraid of saying that she's vain. It's a little bit like me. Like I'm vain and it's okay. So she's a little vain, but she doesn't hide that. And like that becomes the driving force for that voice. And then I'm listening to the audiobook of this book, which is amazing. I'm really like impressed by the team that worked on it. But the Nasreen's character really came back to me and I realized how much I had written her. And I have a terrible memory, so this is why it was important. But I had realized how much I had written her as like the person that is dealing with the internalized hatred of her community and her identity, which is something that a lot of Muslims do deal with, and it affects their lives and how they move forward in their lives, in their adult lives. So that had been my driving force for her. Qais had been like this character that was like had everything at his fingertips, Stanford hopeful and all this stuff, and that's really what drove that character. So each one had their either toxic trait or their that one thing that I just let take the lead, and that usually helps me write their voice, and it really comes through. And I did notice with this book I had written, it's so hard to really ground people in the voices when there's 6 different voices. But I think my editor really pushed me, like, to the point where I was like, would not ask this of like other authors. I was so upset. I told my sister when you were in Boston and I was editing this book, I was like, this is too much. Like, you can't ask me to do all of this. But she really helped me pull out the characters and make sure that each of them sounded fully their own and had their full story developed. So it was also thanks to her.
I mean, yeah, even just seeing where they've come over the last couple of drafts of the book, yeah, was so fun. But I do feel like you could read any chapter just with the names removed and know exactly who it was, like based on how they describe things, based on how they see the world.
Good.
Yeah, no, that's the sign of success. Were some of them easier or harder to write than others? Did someone come to you first?
So some of them were more developed in the first drafts than others. So they were in that way easier to write. I think Qais was easy to write. I read a review, which I read reviews. You're not supposed to, but I don't care. I don't mind.
You can take it.
Yeah, I could take it. I read a review that said that Qais's point of view was very like it was almost like the vessel for the story. And I do feel like when I was listening to it again, I was like, that is true. Like, it did feel like his was the one that was kind of bringing everything together. So I think his was the easiest. Samia was easier too. And they're both the closest to my identity too. They're both Arab American. So that's probably why they were easier. The hardest ones, I think, was Abdullahi, but he really came a long way. Like, I know. And I asked my mom, I was like, who's your favorite? She's like, Abdullahi, because he's like smart and he thinks about things and all the other kids don't. But yeah, Abdullahi was hard because I didn't give him a lot of background because I didn't want to overstep, because he has, he's a Black American boy and I'm a Black, like, Sudani American boy. So I didn't want to overstep and, talk about his story like I knew everything about it. So I tried to do as well as I could without, overstepping in a place that wasn't mine. So he was tough. And then Nasreen, I think, was tough because I don't have those feelings that she has. Some of them, yes, but like a lot of them, no, I don't, the internalized like hatred or like, feeling like an outsider is not something I feel. So it was hard to write her too.
I would never know. Like, I think you do such a good job of stepping in, like, with empathy to each of these different characters' situations and, like, yeah, really trying to understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Am I right that you didn't necessarily, like, plot out whose chapter was going to come when, that it just, like, sort of flowed organically?
Yeah. So I think in the very, very beginning, I had Post-its and I had like written, like, these are the characters that are this is the way it's going to go. I think maybe to chapter like, probably not past 8, like, honestly.
Yeah.
So like then after chapter 8, that's when I started to just, go along with whoever felt like was the right one to go with. And part of it was also like, if I noticed that I had been talking about, I hadn't used somebody's voice in a while, I went to that voice and that helped me to say, what's the next part of this? What's going to happen next in the story? So it helped me to just go, okay, if I'm going to go back to this voice, then this is the part of the story that's going to have to happen next. But I did outline more for this story than any of my other books. So I'm proud of that.
Well, that leads me into the other thing I was wondering about, like, in comparison to the next new Syrian Girl. This is your sophomore book. You now have 2 beautiful books out in the world. What was the experience like with book 2? Were there things that were really different, things that were the same?
It was the same in the sense that the points of view there were more than one point of view. I can't just stay in one point of view for too long. It doesn't help me. It's not conducive to the way my brain works. So it was similar in that way, but the 6 Truths is in third person. So it's very different in the sense that I took a backseat a little bit from their emotions and their internal dialogue. And in the next new Syrian Girl, it's all about character and their development and their internal dialogue. So that was the big difference for me. But I did think that this book couldn't be in first person, not only because it's like 6 points of view and that's like pretty difficult to do, but also because I don't share those identities and I couldn't, have internal dialogue for Zamzam, who's African American. I couldn't do that. So it definitely works for this book, but that was the biggest difference. And this one deals with a lot of themes that I think are important for all Americans. And this one's the next new Syrian Girl feels more appropriate for like children of immigrants. It's more of that kind of a story. So I think those are the biggest differences.
And what about the process of writing it? Like
Mm.
your first book was out in the world, you were editing, you
Oh.
were in school, like yeah, how was all of that in
But you know,
comparison?
the story is like, I had already written this book. Six Truths was already written before I got a deal for my debut. So it hadn't been, I think that helped. There was a certain amount of desperation that I was writing Six Truths during that really helped to write the book quickly. I wrote it really quickly, the first draft. So I wrote it quickly because I was so desperate, because I didn't feel like people were going to buy that first book. No publisher was, biting, and it was stressing me out. And so I wrote this book quite quickly. And so that other book took a while longer. But then the editing for Six Truths, it was in grad school, and I was frustrated because I did feel like it was already, like, my agent and my editor had said it's in such great shape, we don't need that much. But then they were asking me, pull more of the character out from this and pull a character out for this. And I was like, another author, you won't ask all this of them. It really is, like, I do feel like when you are a minority or a marginalized author, they ask a lot of you that wouldn't be asked of for the majority of other authors. So there was a frustration there with that one, with this book. And it was during school, and I was stressed, and it was in grad school. It's not fun, but I think whatever I did do, whether I was happily doing it or not, it really was good to bring out the book the way it is now.
It turned out beautifully. Yeah. I'm sure that, like, very high bar is frustrating.
Yeah.
But it does show in the product. Yeah.
Yeah.
This book is kind of set in LA, but also kind of not.
Yeah.
That might be interesting for people to hear a little bit about. The events take place on a fictional beach, but it's really, like, very representative of a lot of what I see in the city. So I wonder, could you talk a little bit about, like, what vision of LA did you want to depict, and, like, why did you make certain parts fictional and imagined?
Yeah, so the book is set in Los Angeles, but it's on a beach called Monarch Beach, which isn't in Los Angeles. And there's other cities where it's, like, called Valley and Huntington, and those words all come from, different places in LA or Orange County, just so that I can get the sense, make sure that whoever's reading it really feels like they're reading a book that could be set in Los Angeles, because it technically is. But because it's such a sensitive topic because there is an attack on the beach and the kids are suspected of terrorism where there isn't any, I didn't want it to be associated too closely with an actual beach in Los Angeles. So there isn't any, weird feelings. I felt weird about it. So I was like, I want to distance it from reality a bit, because this is an unfortunate reality that I hope never happens. These 6 kids are accused of something as you read through the story, realize why they've been accused and what's being protected, and whose interests are being protected. So it's an unfortunate reality. It's an unfortunate circumstance that could be reality, and I didn't want it to be too closely tied to a real place, just because it makes me feel weird.
Absolutely.
Maybe that's the biggest thing. It just makes me feel weird.
Yeah. And I feel like your depictions of LA are so, like, grounded. I love your details of the kids, like, driving through the city and the different neighborhoods and the different sort of associations with different parts of the city. Was there something you really wanted to depict in the LA that you did show?
I do. I loved. So my first book is written, it's set in Detroit. So I go to Detroit all the time because my family is there, but I didn't feel like a connection with Detroit in that way when I was writing it. I just kind of wrote it as, like, this is the setting because there's a lot of Syrian Americans in Detroit, but I didn't really, like, love the setting. There was a lot of Syria in that book, and that's the setting that I really loved. But in this book, I loved writing that Los Angeles setting because I'm from Southern California. I just loved talking about, there are points in the story that I'm talking about how the city just changes. You're driving down one block, it's so nice and beautiful, and the next block it's run down, and why is it like that? And how come it's just, I wanted to really depict it how I see it. I feel like whenever we read stories, you read more than me, but, like, you tell me. But when I read a book with, like, a California like setting, I never feel like it's California, and I never feel like it's Los Angeles.
It's often like a movie version of it.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel real.
Yeah, and so I didn't want that. I wanted to make it, like, feel as California and as Los Angeles as possible. Like, there's part of it. I think there's like a promenade, and I wanted it to like seem like the Santa Monica like
Totally.
vibe.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to put it fully, and I'm always talking about the 10 and the 405. Of course, I'm going to talk about traffic and freeways in my book, like because that's what we talk about when you're a Californian. So I loved writing it. I don't know if I could write another book in like Los Angeles or California. I don't know if I could do it. I don't know, but because this was so much, like I put so much of the setting into this book. But I did love it, and I think I'd rather write a book in Los Angeles or Orange County kind of vibe rather than somewhere else in the country that I don't feel that connected to, because writing this setting was so much more like gratifying than writing the setting in the other book.
That's so interesting. Yeah. Well, and I can imagine there are other shades of LA that you could explore. I could see another book taking inspiration. I would read one.
Yeah. I mean, you'll read all. We'll read each other's everything.
Yeah. I really wanted to ask about the theme of like narrative in this book. I was just thinking so much about, each of the characters have their own perspective on what happened. The prosecution has their perspective. There's the truth that we don't really know for a long time. And even the like language that you use in the book really sort of reflects this idea of like, we shape the narrative. Calling what happened on the beach an attack versus an explosion, like all of these things that we see in the news and in the media all the time. It's a really rambling question, but I just really wanted to hear you talk about like, how did you think about exploring that idea and showing it in fiction?
So I noticed this too. As I was listening at first, they talk about what happened on the 4th as a explosion, because that's what happened. Like the oil rig explodes. And then as I keep listening to my audiobook, like as if I didn't read it.
Yeah.
As if I didn't write it. They start talking about it as an attack, and then it becomes, a terrorist attack. And then it becomes, and so it doesn't start. The first thing that you hear is not, oh, this is an attack, it's a terrorist attack or anything like that. And I didn't want it to seem like that. I didn't want that to be what the story was mostly about, because when you do read the story, it's about the characters and the narrative and the media and how that shapes not only how they act in the story, but also how they treat each other and how they turn their backs against each other or fight with each other based on the media and the narratives. And there's also those entries, the like Los Angeles Times, whatever it is that I made up in the book, entries. And that's where it comes out like a lot, where it's very timely, as in right now in the media, we hear all sorts of stories that are twisted that make what actually happened, what the truth is, into something completely different. And if you're not educated, or you're not, with around the right people, or you're not talking to, or you're not consuming the right kind of media, you can just believe whatever twisted media, stories out there. And then, your point of view of the whole world and your outlook completely changes and shifts. And that's really what I wanted to capture. And I, again, was reading it again, and I was like, wow, this is so relevant to right now, because as soon as like in October, we know that like they tell us one story and then they backtrack, and then the media is always out there trying to tell us something, and we are the ones that either we just consume and we're not consciously understanding what it is that we're reading and watching, or we can actually be conscious about it. And I think this book is really about which side do you want to be on. So I really consciously made that decision to make sure that media, it's just in there. It's like, it's another way of like moving the story along, of like, this is what happened, but this is what happened within what the media is saying, this journal entry. And you have to, as the reader, also be like, read it consciously and decide, am I going to believe this entry, or am I going to believe what the characters have been telling me this whole time?
And we have all the characters have secrets or different motivations, things they're hiding. The prosecutor who's like trying their case is just like a horrendous evil person. And she's got her own agenda, and obviously like secrets that we learn more about only the very end, not to spoil too much. But you like really are kind of trying to piece it together along the way, even as someone who's like inside of the truth of what's happening. It's just like a very exciting read, I think, for the reader experience that way.
Yeah, I'm excited for everybody to experience it. I think if you read the book without consciously being like removing your prejudice, or understanding and seeing your prejudice when it comes up as you're reading a different book, like it will seem different to you. the characters aren't relatable, or something else, or I just didn't get why, or whatever it is, that readers always think. I think this book is unique in that if you were reading it without removing your prejudice, or at least being willing to learn to remove that prejudice, you will get a different message at the end, I think, and you won't come out of it having learned something, or at least getting the message that I want to give to readers.
It's kind of amazing how the reader has to go along with the same experience that the characters do then, right? Like as they're learning about each other and sort of opening up their minds to other experiences, like we have to do the same thing as we're going through.
Yeah.
I respect it so much. Do you have writing routines? Do you have, like, as you were working on this, are things like important to your process or help you get in the flow?
I think that it's changed. I think like I used to write books with music in my ears, and I used to be able to write like in the middle of everything else happening. I could like sit with my whole family and everything's going on around me. And that was actually preferable. I was like, if my family's just writing around, or like not writing, if my family's just walking around and talking, I can write. But then I don't think I could do that anymore. I think I've changed after I moved away and came back to be back with my family. I feel like now I'm trying to find out what to do. But during this book, it was, again, that desperate race. So I think this book was unique in that and maybe the thing is that every book is different. You have a different writing routine for each book. And for this one, it was just that desperate race because I was so desperate to get a book out. And while I was, I think, going through like a bunch of different things, like checking with you, like you remember.
Yeah, I do.
You probably do. But as I was going through trying to get this book kind of out there, that's, I think, when my debut was picked up. So it was all like very close together. And I think I was still really desperate after I had gotten that one. The process is so long. So when my debut was like picked up, then it was going to be 2 years and I had to wait. And I had to wait so long to get this book to my agent, to my publisher, to get picked up again. And it was even though I raced through writing this book, it still took forever. And now that all of this is over, now I have 2 books out. I think my writing routine is just like, I don't know what it is anymore. I haven't been writing very well recently. So
you have a lot going on. Yeah. I think it's hard to write when a book is releasing. That seems just impossible. Yeah. You're promoting, you're hoping this book lands with its readers in the world. Yeah. Can you tell us any more about sort of like what you are hoping might be next, or like types of stories that you're hoping to write, or like other topics or characters you'd like to explore?
Yeah, so while I'm saying I don't write anymore, I do have other projects.
Always.
I do have other projects, but I just haven't written anything recently. But I do have other projects. I do want to write a book that's set in Syria, and with those characters post-revolution. So my first book is really more about it's more closer to the beginning of the revolution. So it's more, or it's less about, what's happening now in Syria. So I want to write a book, or I have written a book, and I want it to get picked up.
It's fantastic. Yeah.
About 2 kids in Syria. So I want to do that. And then I do love a character in my debut, and I do want him to have his own book as well. But I haven't written anything right now.
But you have 2 amazing projects, like maybe in the pipeline.
Hopefully, yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yes.
Is there anything else that you really wanted to share with people about this book, or anything that I'm forgetting to ask you that I really should?
I don't think so. I think you're doing such a great job. You
gotta check my notes.
Yeah, I think I've talked about more than I even expected to talk about with this book.
Good. Yeah, I feel like I've hit most of my highlights. Maybe I can just ask one last question, and then if anyone else has questions, we'll have some time for the audience. What was your absolute favorite thing about writing this book?
Oh, that's so hard.
Yeah, sorry.
Wait. I love writing characters, and I love like the voice of characters. So I think just getting really into each character and just I really love, like, I'm gonna say it again, I love Gijs's character, and so I really love
so much.
I know, right? And I don't want to talk about him too much, but like I love because I don't want to, I don't want the others to feel bad, but
Yeah. But you do have a favorite
Yeah,
child.
yes. But I loved writing his character. I feel like his growth and
Yes.
his whole storyline and his whole storyline with Mushza, I think, is so important and so great. And I love that.
Yeah.
I love the reveal scene at the end
Yes.
that I can't talk about,
I
but I
know.
loved writing that.
Yeah, it hits so
Yeah,
hard.
yeah. So if you read the book and then you get to the reveal scene, then you'll know.
I love him because he really does have such a dramatic transformation.
Mhm.
Like he's this sort of golden boy jock. He, feels quite different from the rest of the characters, but he has history with some of them too.
Mhm.
And then watching him sort of come along to embracing the community they have is just, really beautiful.
And also Samia, though, she was funny to write. I liked, she was the influencer. So
I love her too. Yeah.
She was just like, she said all the wildest things that like I wish I could say.
Yeah.
And sometimes I do say them, but like she definitely does. So I loved writing her because she was not afraid of anything. So she just said anything and everything, and I loved writing her. But I do think it's weird. Now that I'm listening to it, the characters that I'm drawn to the most aren't. Maybe it is Khay still, but it's not Samia. It's Abdullahi now, which I didn't expect myself to be so drawn to him. And maybe it's because I had written a lot of his story like later on in my drafting experience. So reading him or listening to him again is very, I'm like, wow, interesting. Like he is great. Like I just, I haven't seen it complete like that. Especially because when you're editing, it feels like a lot more choppy than when you're drafting. So Abdullahi really feels like great. I love him.
Me too.
But yeah, I just
as you name them all, I'm like, I love them all.
Yeah. Exactly. Even just like parts of like Zamzam, I really like feel for her, and I really there's like a part of her that's angry about something and about her brother leaving, and then another part of her understanding why somebody might leave. I love that growth of her, so I love her too. I love them all. Well, but I loved writing them. Like the characters it's really about the characters. And that's what I love the most. Yeah.
And you can tell, you need all 6 of them to tell the story. Really. I don't think you could remove anyone.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Can we have maybe a round of applause? Thank you.
Thank you for your wonderful question.
Oh, it's a joy. I'm just like always full of questions. Yeah. What do you all want to hear? Crucial information.
So I think I guess the research was really just reaching out to people. So there's one character that's from Afghanistan. She was written at a time when I was a teacher at a school for Afghani and Syrian refugees. So I had a really small classroom with like 4 high school girls, and they were all from Afghanistan. And I learned a lot from them. And that's kind of that was my inspiration for writing her. So that was my research. I didn't write a character that I didn't feel like I had like spoken to somebody of that background enough, and, talked to them enough, and just learned a lot about their culture. I kept away from those characters or those backgrounds, and I did just put in whatever I felt confident enough to write. That's a good question though. Yeah. Yes.
What got you into book writing? Like when you first started, did you have an idea of how you could start and progress into being a book publisher?
I started just loving like writing and making stories. So I started when I was like in middle school. Or maybe like early high school. I really just loved writing stories. And then as I felt like my sisters read my books, a couple of my friends read my books, they were like, "You're great at this." And I was like, why can't I write a book then? And I'm very like what's that called? Headstrong. Very like I was like, I can do it. I can get my book out there then. And so Twitter was big, and that was like really truly helped a lot of marginalized authors find the community, find agents, and I was lucky enough that when I really wanted to publish a book and I wanted to learn about it, I got on Twitter, and there was such a big community of marginalized authors helping each other, and there were so many little pitch events and things like that on Twitter that really like just taught us so much. And honestly, some people are like, how did you know how to do it? You just Google it, you know?
Yeah.
Like I just Googled it, and then Twitter was really helpful. Yeah. And then you just have to have so much determination and not be afraid of rejection, like so much rejection. And so my personality helped because I'm not afraid of rejection, or at least I was a lot better at it. You know, when you're younger, you're like, I could take it all. Say no again, actually. And then, alhamdulillah, like eventually I was able to, find the right connections. And I do thank Twitter, the OG Twitter, for doing that for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yes.
Do you feel less imposter syndrome with the second book release?
Good question. Does it go away?
I don't know. It goes away in the sense, like last year when I went to the bookstore for the first time and saw my book, and I had signed like a lot of the copies for a pre-order campaign, I was like red in the face. I was like so embarrassed for some reason. It was just so unnatural. I was like, well, yeah, I did write this book, but it feels weird to sign it and to, and you see the pictures from that day. I was like literally a tomato. So it was not a fun experience. Today is a lot more relaxed. I feel a lot more like, yes. And it goes away from being imposter syndrome to being really disappointing when things don't work out. Like at first it's like, of course it's not going to work out. Like I'm not a real author, because you have that imposter syndrome. And then once you have the second one, you're like, but no, why can't I do that? Like I'm an author now. Like, shouldn't I be able to? And there's a lot of closed doors, and there's a lot of, ceilings for marginalized authors, and I hit a lot of them, and I feel like I just keep hanging my head out,
But good thing your head's strong.
Yeah.
You're gonna break through.
So it goes away from being imposter syndrome to just being disappointing and like, okay, like, and so maybe it is imposter syndrome, just like, evolved.
But it sounds like you like blame yourself less when things
Yeah.
go wrong, and you look more at the system and start to question why, which seems healthier.
Yeah. And it is the system. It's, even with their first book, it's not like you're not an imposter. If you don't feel fully confident, it's because the people around you weren't supporting you enough, I think. And your team at your publisher, they weren't supporting you enough, or you didn't fight back and say, no, I want this, which I had to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yes. I wrote the book, I think, what is this, 2020? What is it, 2020?
24 now.
24. Maybe 2021, maybe. I wrote it, but then last summer was when my publisher acquired it. And so that's when I started editing it within the last year and a half. And now you have it. It's out. Since the draft, yeah. But maybe 4 years since the draft. But since the acquiring, a lot like shorter than what it usually takes. It usually takes like 2 years or more. But the book was in pretty good shape, so we didn't wait like even longer.
Are you looking to maybe make your books into?
I wish. This one, yeah. Read the audiobook is already halfway there. Like I truly am so impressed by the way that they made the audiobook. The way that it works for a movie, you need to get a film agent, and there's like a lot of closed doors again, and it would be a lot more years than just like 2 years of waiting for the book to get out. But I think this book would be great as a movie, and I would definitely go for that. I'm any film agents like
yeah, call her up.
Yeah, but I would love to. Yeah.
Is the audiobook full cast? Do they have different narrators for each of them?
It's 3 narrators, and one of them does like the media and like Favreau, the prosecutor, and one of them does the boys' voices, and one of them does the girls' voices. I'm going to send you a free
Thank
code.
you.
Yeah.
I'm on hold for it at the library.
I'm going to send it to you. Yeah.
It sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's good. Any other questions? Yes. Okay. Yes.
What kind of projects do you find like you want to work on in the future that would be so fun or exciting?
Something like to tackle?
Yeah.
I'd actually love to write another one of these kinds of books, not like with the same premise, but with like 6 points of view. I think it was so fun. I think I need to find a premise. Like what the book started with, this is the premise, and then the 6 characters were what really drove it forward. But I want to do something like this again. I think it would be really fun. I don't know if I could do it anymore. Like I think I needed that desperation to write this book, but I want to do that, inshallah.
I think you could do it. Another like thriller mystery.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I have to, yeah. I mean, I would love it. And I think the 6 points of view works with a thriller mystery.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I hope I can keep doing it.
I'm excited. One day.
Mhm. Oh, yes.
Hard to choose the cover.
Oh. So not really. I liked the concept that they gave me. They gave me a few different concepts and they sent them to me. And I really liked the eye concept. And then they had given me some like options. And I was like, I don't love the different options that you're giving me. So I had to kind of fight back and say, no, I don't want this to be like this. I'm a very opinionated author. Like, I don't know. We have another author in here. Go around and try to get her. She'll pass out the bookmarks.
Yeah.
And Emily again is a writer as well. But like, I'm a very picky author. So I think sometimes they ask me less questions because they're like, please don't ask her again because she'll say something. But yeah, I had to push back and I had to say, no, I like the concept, but can you change it a little bit? Because I want to see it like this. So it wasn't hard. I love the like illustrator. There's little scenes in the eyes. I loved the way the illustrator did that. But no, it wasn't that hard. They did great. Brittany.
After you finished writing a book, did you feel like you felt more proud of yourself or accomplished?
After I finished writing this book? Yeah, I think, I don't know. That's like a deeper question. Now I'm thinking about like my whole like sense of self.
Yeah. Do you feel self-actualized yet?
Of course, I'm going to think of it as a lot more deep than you probably wanted me to answer it. But yeah, I think every time I write a book, I'm really proud and I'm really happy. It's hard to like celebrate the little moments. It's really like you have to consciously be like, I want to sell it, because while you're writing this, you're sending an email to your agent about this other book and trying to get something else. And it's hard, but you really have to be really present to try to enjoy. And so it's really, it goes on you because it's such a solitary experience and solitary like job. Now that it's a job and not a hobby, but it's pretty solitary until you have to tell yourself like, be proud, be happy, celebrate. Yeah. And you asked a question. That's a good question because it was not, it was called We Held These Truths. And I really like that title. And then my publisher was like, no, not that one. So I was like, okay. My agent picked this title. Yeah. Yeah. It's that feeling of like there's two truths and there's two truths and a lie. Here's 3 things, and which one is the lie? Because the whole book is about what the truth really is, and all these characters have different secrets and they have different versions of what happens on the 4th of July, which is when the attack happens, or see the explosion, the explosion. So that's what you're trying to figure out. What's the lie? But yeah, my agent takes credit for that one. Yeah.
I like both titles.
I like We Held These Truths. I think it's so much. This is more thriller, and that one's more, I think, contemporary, or I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I think that's why they don't like it. I have.
That's
yeah.
true.
One of these days, I think also my agent picked the title for this book. No, actually, no. I picked this one. That's right.
Yeah.
But so I did. Yeah, for this book. Oh yeah. I did come up with that one. It's titles are hard for me. I'm not good at them. But
and they change all the time in the process.
So many times.
And I think this one just turned out beautifully though. I love the title. I love the cover. It's a perfect product.
Me too.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Truly.
Thank you.
Last call for questions. We're probably wearing out our welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for coming out.
You.
Maybe one last round of applause.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Are you signing books if people want?
Yes.
If anyone wants a book signed.
Yes, please come
I'll
up.
be